church. How's everybody doing this morning? A little tired. I can hear it. It's okay. It's kind of cold outside, so it would be. I'm tired and cold. But you know what we get to do today? We get to worship Jesus. So I'm just going to pray, and then we're going to get going. So Jesus, thank you for this morning. Thank you for the opportunity to worship you. God, we ask that you would speak to us this morning, and that we could hear from you. We pray all these things in your name. Amen. You guys stand and worship with us?
And I'm surrounded on every side. Can see the light of day, but I am persuaded beyond all you won't let go of me. I stake my blame on every word you say. You will not be erased. I will sing through fire and thunder, 'cause you are on my side. I trust you with my life. I know my story isn't over, even against all odds. You are a faithful God.
Let's sing in darkness. The darkest of weather, though I can't see, I still believe you're good. So I'm moving forward through crashing waves. I know I'm safe with you. You hold my life, you hear my cry with every breath inside.
I will sing through fire and thunder, 'cause you are on my side. I trust you with my life. I know my story isn't over, even against all odds. Oh, you are a faithful God. Oh, you're a faithful I am convinced that your promises will hold together, and I will dwell in the hope of your love forever. I am convinced that your promises will hold together, and I will dwell in your love. Oh,
I am convinced that your promises will hold together, and I will dwell in the hope of your love forever. I am convinced that your promises will hold together, and I will dwell in your love. Oh, I will sing through fire and thunder, 'cause you are on my side. I trust you with my life. I know my story isn't over, even against all odds. Oh, you are a faithful God. Yes, faithful God.
yes, you are a faithful God. And that's who you are.
Let's give Jesus some praise this morning.
Can you hear the angels song? The rains are sweet from heaven's eye, the music fell, mercy of the Savior. Oh, glory in the highest, and on the earth
James chapter 4. He wrote, draw close to God and God will draw close to you. Wash your hands, you sinners. Purify your hearts. We just want to take a time to just do that in our own lives. So we're going to open up a time of communion in just a second. And take just this next song to breathe. In fact, we want to encourage you guys just to kind of not have a traffic flow. If you want to come down this aisle and go back around. But just to take that moment as you grab that cracker and that juice and just say, you know what, God, this week's been tough. But I know your life was so much tougher and you did it for me. And so just take each piece of that and remember what he did for you. To just take that time and breathe. So Lord, we just lift up each piece. Father, that your body was broken and beat for us. That your blood was shed for us. You chose to give that time to purify our lives so that we could draw close to you. Because without your sacrifice, it's just not what we could. We were so far away, and now we get to come to you. So Lord, we ask that as we come to you with those things and those times that we just need to lay down, that you would do the same for us and draw close to us. Help us to know that you are pursuing us.
Oh, hail King Jesus. Oh, hail the Lord of heaven and earth. Oh, hail King Jesus. Oh, hail the Savior of the world. All right, church, if you believe in Jesus, then these promises are for you. So say them with me. I am deeply loved, highly favored, greatly blessed, totally righteous, and destined to reign because of Jesus.
And you guys can have a seat. If we haven't met yet, my name is Ange. I'm married to Pastor Dan. This is only our second Sunday here, so y'all new faces to me. So come up, say hey afterward. I'd love to connect with you if we haven't met in person yet. With that, too, if any of you are new here, it's hard for me to know who's new, who's not new. If you are new here today, you'll notice in the seat back in front of you, we have some new here cards. Grab one of those, fill it out, drop it in the offering bucket as it goes by later. It just helps us be able to keep in contact with you, let you know what's going on with the church. We're never going to come knocking at your door or anything like that, so you don't have to worry about that. With that, too, if you flip over that new here card, on the other side it says next steps. Those of you that have been here for a while, if you're ready to take that next step, whether it be in volunteering or in learning more about baptism, learning more about recovery, different things that we're going to offer here, go ahead and fill that out and drop that in the offering bucket as well. We are going to transition our worship time now into a time of giving, and that's exactly what giving is. It's an extension of our worship. We're bringing an offering to the Lord. We're giving him back a portion of what he's given to us and saying thank you. So they're going to prepare that real quick. There's always multiple ways you can give here at Free Grace United. You can give online, you can text the mobile app, or you can use the envelopes at your seed bucket. With that, can everybody pull out these cards? Does anybody have an envelope? You should have an envelope in your program today. Hold them up so I know everybody's got one today. Does everybody know what this is? We've been talking about it all month long. It's our Build the Kingdom offering that we're taking between now and Christmas Eve. And we've kind of talked about the different pillars of Build the Kingdom. We've talked about church planting. We've talked about, last week was global. This week, it's one near and dear to our hearts. It's Pine Lake Camps. So we're talking about Pine Lake Camps today. But through the Build the Kingdom offering this far, all of our gifts and pledges totaling for 2025 so far are $554,000. Isn't that amazing what God is doing so far? And we know he's got so much more planned for us. We did not set a goal for Build the Kingdom this year as a team. Our goal is that every family in Free Grace United would give in some capacity. So we don't have a number goal set, but we just want to make sure that every family, whatever God leads you to give, is participating in this year. So I encourage you to take that out, to look over it. You can give a gift today. You can give a pledge over the next year. But if you want to fill that out, you can drop that in the offering bucket as well. So we're going to watch a quick video about Pine Lake Camps while they pass the buckets this morning.
Hey church, each year between Thanksgiving and Christmas, we come together to give a special offering that historically we've called our Thanks Christmas offering. But starting last year, we now call it our Build the Kingdom offering.
And the way that God has called Free Grace United to build the kingdom is 4 pillars. First of all, global, helping churches around the world. Secondarily, Pine Lake Camps, in which we help kids find and follow Jesus. Third, Free Grace Bible College, in which we raise up the next generation of leaders to take the church further. And then lastly, church planting, because we believe if we could advance the gospel with new churches, man, the gospel could spread around the world. Today I want to focus on Pine Lake Camps.
God has done amazing things at Pine Lake Camps in 2024. Here are just a few of the highlights. In 2024, we were able to see God bring back a large majority of our 2023 summer staff members, so our team is growing strong. We have really been able to build up our summer staff as we've been able to add layers to our leadership and invest personally and spiritually in our staff. This was our strongest, most invested summer team we've ever had, and the unity we experienced made for a great season of ministry. This year's summer camp theme was Power of Words. We got to use a superhero theme to teach the kids that our words are like a superpower that can be used for good to fight evil. Campers at PLC got to spend their week having a blast while using the Word of God to build one another up and combat the lies of the enemy. The campers learned our 6 faith statements that God says they are deeply loved, highly favored, greatly blessed, totally righteous, and destined to reign because of Jesus. We were able to see 53 kids cross the line of faith and say yes to following Jesus for the very first time. 265 kids chose to rededicate their lives and go all in for Christ, and 15 senior high campers chose to get baptized. Because of your generosity and God's provision over this year, we were able to give this really old camp some extra love and care as we continue to improve the space that God's been using for so many people to have encounters with Him. We got to put in a brand new camp activity this year, a rock climbing wall. We've also been able to implement some new gathering spaces around camp with a spider web, a lake lookout with swinging benches and a fire pit, new seating outside the game cabin, and more benches added to our outdoor amphitheater. We remodeled our kitchen by removing old countertops and shelving and replacing it with stainless steel countertops and much better storage. We were also able to get a new lawnmower and winterize the maintenance shop this year so that we can continue to have maintenance and repairs throughout the winter season and best utilize our time. This fall, we began expanding our ministry to invest more in adults. In addition to our men's and women's retreats, we have added soul care retreats where people who are already followers of Jesus can come and reconnect with God and find rest for their mind, body, and soul. We are also planning a pastor's prayer and writing retreat and our first recovery retreat in the spring. We have already seen God show up in very big ways during these retreats, giving adults healing, hope, and new passion to live life in deeper relationship with Christ. Thank you so much for your generosity and the ways you and your families have supported our camp. We are so excited about what God is doing, and we can't wait to see what He has in store for Pine Lake Camps in 2025.
Isn't that super cool? And we get to be a part of Pine Lake Camps here on this camp. It's so awesome. That's been such a huge part for our family. We just love this place. And so, as we give this week or next week through the Build the Kingdom offering, just keep in mind the things that we're giving to. We're a church that believes in life change, and we support that in everything that we do. And so we're giving for church planting, we're giving for our global, we're giving for Pine Lake Camps, and we're giving for Free Grace Bible College, so that more and more people can learn about God and just be one step closer to finding and following Him. So with that, we are going to switch gears and do some announcements this morning. First up is we want you to join us next weekend. We are nearing the end of our Bible Cover to Cover series. We are almost there. And next weekend, we are going to crash out 4 books in 1 week. And so if you miss it, you're going to miss a whole lot. So make sure you're here next week for 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John and Jude. Bring a friend with you. We are getting so close to the end, and we want you to be here with us. After that, this week we have, we're not going to have our regular student church, but for those of you who are interested, every Wednesday at 6 o'clock starts food, 6:30 is student church. Anybody 6th through 12th grade is invited to join us Wednesday nights here at the church. This Wednesday, though, is going to be a little different. It's for everybody, the whole church family. We are having a family Christmas party. And see, I didn't get my slide made in time, so this is very vague slide for you this morning. But a family Christmas party here Wednesday night at 6:30. We're going to have a free supper. We are going to have Christmas cookie decorating. We're going to have gingerbread house building, candy cane bingo, and I heard that Santa is going to be here, and he has a present for every kid that comes. So make sure you come Wednesday night at 6:30 for just a family night fun. There's going to be games for youth too, so it's not just kid related. Everybody is invited. It's going to be a good time for us to get to know each other and just kind of jump into this holiday season together. So make sure you're here. If you know that you're going to come, a lot of you have my cell phone number. Send me a text or message me on Messenger just so we can kind of plan for food. Let me know how many in your family is coming so we can plan appropriately. But we will have enough for everybody. After that, it's our Christmas Eve service is coming up. Can you believe it? It's almost Christmas, guys. We are almost there. Christmas Eve at 4 p.m. here, we are having our candlelight Christmas service, and we want you to be here with us. So come, bring a friend, bring your family. We're going to have you out of here early. It's going to be like an hour tops. You'll be ready to go to supper, Christmas dinner, whatever plans you have. So make sure you join us on Christmas Eve. With that, we are going to switch gears to our community time. Today, so if you don't know what community time is, it's a time where we just greet each other before we go into the service. Sometimes it makes people nervous if you're introverted and you're like, oh, I don't want to talk to the person next to me, and you don't know what to say. It's okay. We give you ideas of what you can say. You can go up, introduce yourself, and tell them something that fascinates you. What's something that just absolutely makes you go, and fascinates you today? So, everybody stand up. And we are going to take 60 seconds on the clock and go greet our neighbors. And during this time, the kids are going to follow me to Kids Church because I'm your teacher today. So ready, set, go greet your neighbor.
Are you going to baby church? Are you going to little kid church today or kid? Okay, wait, get down.
All right, well, we're going to go ahead and get started. I noticed that Mason made sure to get a nice little timer on there for me. He knows that I need that, so we'll see if I ignore it and just keep going, right? So I asked the question, and I am curious. Does anybody have something that they grew up and they were just fascinated with? I taught school for a long time, over the last decade or so, and usually the boys, the younger they were, it was trains, right? And then anybody want to share?
Trains as well.
Ben is fascinated with trains, okay. I wasn't that kid. I was pretty much fascinated with any and all things fire. Everybody's like, oh, yeah. There we go. See, now the guys are like, yes, totally. Fire.
We've been firefighting.
Yeah. I had nothing to do with firefighting. I just love to watch it burn, and you grow up and you're lighting tissues in your room with a lighter that you snuck from a friend's house, and then you light your house up or your carpet on fire and put something over it in the middle so your dad doesn't yell at you, that kind of stuff. I debated which fire story I should share with you guys, but I remember as a kid, this one's one of my favorites. As a kid, we went to this camp, and it wasn't like this camp. It was more like an old school Boy Scout camp where, you had your latrines, but your latrines were literally a hole in the ground. And if you needed to wash your hands, you went outside and used the dirt because water was like a 5-minute jog away. And so we were up there on a work weekend thinking that we're tough stuff, and we noticed there was this big old wasp nest up there, and we were aspiring men, and we were going to solve the problem. So we went and got the lighter fluid and made sure that they were all gone, right? Well, methane and lighter fluid and dry wasp nests and no water. So as aspiring men, we came up with the only way that we could think to put out the fire in that moment. was what water we had with us. And it wasn't necessarily us spitting on the fire. But we got the fire out. We figured it out. Yeah. And you know, those are the type of things that you're sitting here going, what in the world, and how does this even relate to Peter? Well, if you know anything about Peter was the fiery, spicy one, right? He was the guy who, as soon as they were coming to arrest Jesus, he took a sword from somebody else and cut an ear off. Like, he was always spouting off his mouth. He was full of fire, right? And if you read 1st and 2nd Peter, I'm going to propose an idea to you. I think secretly, Peter loved fire. Now, it'll make more sense in a little bit, but we're just going to go ahead and, like we said before, I want to just get started in these books, and so we can talk about what God inspired them to write through it. Now, we are currently in books, where are we at? Book 60, that totally doesn't look right. There we go. Book 60 and 61. So 1st and 2nd Peter, usually when we get up there and say, who wrote which epistle? Most of the time people say what? Paul, right? He wrote most of it. Well, we're in the books of the people who actually wrote it. So 1st and 2nd Peter were written by Peter. Real shocking revelation, right? They were epistles, or they were letters that Peter wrote. See, I'm so used to saying that Paul wrote. They were letters that Peter wrote to all the different churches. And he wrote them from a place called Babylon. Now, that was his code name for Rome. Because if he talked about how evil the place was that he was, what would happen to him? Yeah, like they'd kill him right there on the spot. So what did they do? They backed up and we're going to call it the evil place that we called it in the Old Testament. This is the new Babylon, which was really Rome. So in 1 Peter chapter 5, it says, your sister church here in Babylon sends you greetings, and so does my son Mark. Now, most people are like, well, does he have a son named Mark? He could have, but it was mostly Mark that we split back and we go Matthew, Mark, right? So he was one of the ones that wrote Gospels, and he was there with Peter. In fact, a lot of the disciples, when they split up, a couple of them would stay together so that they could encourage each other and build each other up. And when you're sitting in what they consider to be the worst place on earth for them, they needed that encouragement and building up. So these were written right about the end of Peter's life. Somewhere between 60 and 64 AD was 1 Peter. And 2 Peter is written about 65 AD. And they were written to all the church planted throughout Rome, like we said, to God's elect exiles scattered throughout the different provinces. So Peter's concern was for the church. Now, if you're sitting in the evil of all evil places, what are you going to be worried about? That everybody is going to keep going with what you were going on. And so when Peter sat down and he wrote short books, right? Peter wasn't the guy who liked to talk real long or do lots of things. He was the guy of action. And so his books actually talk more about action. Now, I want to really help you understand the background behind it. So we need to talk a little bit about the setting of the book where Peter was at. The world that Peter was living in at this point was terrible. Now, terrible to him, but not so much to everybody else. Rome was like this amazing place, and you might catch a little correlation here, amazing place where you could go and be somebody new and do great things as long as you followed who? The emperor, right? The Caesar, the one in charge. In fact, this is in Rome. This is the Vatican outside. This is St. Peter's Square. In that time frame, there was a massive amount of persecution going on to Christians in that area. Now, it wasn't because they didn't like the religion aspect of things as everybody was talking. It was because they wouldn't follow the way that the culture was supposed to lean on. So how many of you have ever been downtown Eldora? Every single one of us? Yeah, there we go. It's set up in what? A square, right? And all the shops are on the outside. And if pretty much you go to any normal town here in Iowa, you're going to see the government center in the center and then all the shops on the outside. And this was actually modeled after a lot of places over in Europe where they would have the center of town be the most important spot, and then everything around it was the shops and what everything, where they could go to communicate with other people, trade with other stuff. But right in the center wasn't necessarily like ours. It was what the most important thing was to Rome. And who was the most important thing to Rome? Caesar. In fact, Caesar was so great, people called him, he was beyond. He was the king of all kings, the Lord of all lords. You catching a little issue here with the Christians now? And they would put up whoever was the current Caesar, the current ruler, they would make statues of him and place them all over in the center of this town. And they would have these little fires going outside, and they would burn incense praising him. And anytime you went by, your job was to pay a penny, get a thing of incense, and go drop it on there as an offering to the God that made all of life possible. Now, some of you are like, that is terrible. We can't do that. I would never do that. How am I going to worship and honor a dude who's going to die? Right? And his legacy is going to be taken over by the next guy who's going to be just as fallible and have issues just like him. And the Roman guards would stand over, and they were peacekeepers, right? But those peacekeepers knew everything that went on in those cities. And they noticed a trend. There was a certain group of people who wouldn't pay to take and put the offering of incense to their God. And that's a problem. Because if you're not going to honor this God, then you are going to be trouble in the center, or in the city. So what do? They start persecuting them. And I'm not talking like they yell at them or make fun of them. They impale them with sticks and light them with oil for their garden parties. They do other, when I say terrible, unspeakable acts, I mean, I could go down the list right now and you're probably just like, this is making me sick. Needless to say, what they would do is they would make sure to torment, torture, and kill every Christian that they could find in the most barbaric ways. We already know that crucifixion is probably the worst thing that humans have ever developed in terms of pain and torture. But they continue to just refine that and build that. In fact, this place right here, this obelisk, this tall statue that's right there, when the Romans took over Egypt, they actually took that down and shipped it over to right here to show that they worship their gods and we took their gods and we're greater than them. And this is the very place where Peter was crucified. In fact, he said, I'm not worthy enough to be crucified like my Lord. And so instead of them crucifying him right side up, they flipped him and crucified him upside down. This is the kind of stuff that the Christians were dealing with. The pain, torture, suffering, like all of this over and over and over, right? And then we step and back up and realize that time after time, when somebody doesn't like us, we back down. But yet, these martyrs for our faith were the ones who grew and changed the entire world for generations to come. Think of it this way. When Jesus left this earth and ascended to heaven, how many followers were there? 120. Those 120 went out in their deaths. In fact, every one of the disciples, with the exception of John, but he was boiled in oil alive, died because they believed in Christ. And they would not refute that. And so when we look at the type of suffering and pain that's going on here, we realize that there's so much more to life. And they took those 120, and there's now millions to billions all over the world, and have been in generations. It didn't matter what kind of suffering or pain. In fact, that's where we get into 1 Peter. And 1 Peter's whole focus is this, that we need to suffer well. There's always pain and torture and frustration, right? Peter uses the verb suffering 12 times and the noun 4 times for suffering. He talks about suffering over and over and over. And when we go back and forth and we're like, yes, I'm suffering because I cannot find Dr. Pepper in any store right now. Right? Like, that's our type of suffering. Some of you are like, what do you mean? Go look for Dr. Pepper right now. I don't know what's going on.
No.
But I don't know what's going on. It's frustrating, but is that really suffering? And when Peter's writing about suffering, think of what he's writing about. All the people that are around him who are dying and being tortured, and we complain about Dr. Pepper. Right? The key verse in 1 Peter is this. Beloved, do not think it strange concerning the fiery trial, which is to try you, and as though some strange thing happened to you. Suffering is normal for Christians. In fact, if we really back ourselves up and we look at all the different verses, all the different things that were going on in that time, people suffered, and they did it because they knew that there's something greater. I keep looking at these things and thinking about it. If I jump to this next let me start here. Notice, and remember how I started with, I think Peter is secretly a pyro, right? Notice it. We'll go back to that first one. Notice how he says this, concerning the fiery trial. In fact, we'll go through a lot of verses, and most of the time, Peter likes writing about fire. And if you've ever, I started thinking about this. Because suffering is normal for us, we have to understand what is it actually doing. And if I look at it from the terms of fire, I like to look at things and try to understand them how God has created them in the natural world. So if you've ever watched like a show where they're going after gold, right? They go and they get this precious metal, but this precious metal is actually tainted with a whole bunch of stuff. And so they have to bring it to this special guy named a smelter. We're not going to talk about why he has a weird name, and it has nothing to do with actually smelling things, but they take and they put a chemical, some type of chemical, depending upon what metal it is, and they start to put it over the fire. And they tap it, and they swirl it, and as it heats up, all the imperfections pull away. And those fiery trials, those tribulations and things, the imperfections just rise to the top, and then they just scrape it off the top. And the hotter the metal is, the hotter the fire is, all the impurities just start rising to the top for God to just sweep off. Can you imagine how painful it would be if we were looking at our lives and God were to say, I'm going to do surgery. First, I have to cut you in half to take out this one little piece. But he developed this way of these suffering and trials that bring the impurities up to the top so he can just scrape them off. And when they scrape those impurities off, guess what happens? The metal is more precious than when it went in the fire. And this isn't just one little piece. You guys know what diamonds are too, right? Diamonds are coal that's been put under intense heat and pressure, and they become beautiful. You're like, well, they grow them in labs now too, right? How do they grow them in labs? With heat and pressure. You cannot get anything precious that we consider important unless it goes through these sufferings and these trials, and it's been put through the fire and the pressure. So this is what I want to do. Let's keep looking at some of this. This next part, 1 Peter 4:13, is this: but rejoice to the extent that you partake of Christ's sufferings, that when his glory is revealed, you may also be glad with exceeding joy. So when this trial, this frustration, the suffering that you're going through comes up, we get to rejoice. Now, when you're going through pain and frustration, like you can't find Dr. Pepper anywhere, are you rejoiceful? No, you usually get angry and like want to say some words and like go talk to a store clerk that they're being so lazy that they can't bring out what you need, right? But in the reverse sense, Peter is saying this: stop and rejoice. Bring joy back to your life, because what God is doing is going to make it more precious in the end. That frustration, that hurt, that pain. And in fact, this next point is simply this. And I just want to read it because I want it to hear in our heads. When suffering, we're drinking from the same cup as Christ himself. We can't get closer to Jesus than that. Is that true? You know, we usually when we hear the word suffering and we go to the Bible, the first thing we go for is Job. Because we think of Job's life and the trials and the frustrations and all the things that happens to him. And in the end, God shakes it out, right? But 1 Peter is so much better because Peter got to sit there and watch Jesus suffer. And he got to watch how Jesus handled the suffering, which shows us how we do, which is exactly what he said. It's this idea on how if we really go back and understand that suffering is going to be normal for us. A life without suffering is a life that never changes, it grows. Peter continued and he wrote this. He said, but let none of you suffer as a murderer, a thief, an evildoer, or as a busybody in other people's matters. Yet if anyone suffers as a Christian, let him not be ashamed. Now, I'm jumping ahead and I'm going to go back in just a second, but I wanted to get this point across. There are times where like, I'm suffering and it hurts me. And sometimes that suffering that we're doing is because we've done dumb stuff. True? Like when I lit my room on fire, that's dumb stuff. I can't sit there and pretend like, oh, me getting punished for lighting my room on fire is suffering for Christ. Like we do that sometimes where we sit there, we've done dumb stuff and we're blaming, we need to stop and say, why are we actually suffering? Do we need to be ashamed for the things that we've done so that we don't do the stupid things again? Those things we need to start and really bring back. In fact, I want to go back to this point. In 1 Peter 4:14, he says, if you are reproached for the name of Christ, blessed are you. For the Spirit of the glory and of God rest upon you. On their part, he is blasphemed, but on your part, he is glorified. There's a special blessing on our lives when we suffer. It's not a blessing when we suffer for the dumb things that we continually do. It's a blessing when we suffer because what we're doing is lifting up Jesus and exalting who he is. You know, you walk into a place where you normally wouldn't walk into and you're sharing the gospel with somebody and somebody comes at you and starts screaming at your face. It's a little bit of suffering. But what are you doing it for? You're doing it for his glory, not for yours. And that special blessing, sometimes we don't see that as a blessing. But there are times in our lives where we have prayed for something deep, true? We're like, God, I need you to help get rid of this in my life because it's so frustrating and so painful and I can't handle it. And then we go through this thing. And that suffering and that pain, it boils deep within us. And those impurities start to come out, that thing that we didn't want to get rid of. but we knew that God wanted it out of us. That sin that we held so dear, or that thing that was more important to us than to him, and we put that on the altar of worshiping. You know, when we could just walk by the altar in the middle of the courtyard that the Romans had and just been like, well, I'll just do it so that they leave me alone. And sometimes that stopping that thing, or that going back, helps to really bring us back to that relationship with God and say, this is no longer my God. And the suffering that's occurring around us helps us to see what we have put in the place of God. And that special blessing that God gives us is sometimes the very things that we pray that God is bringing out of us. If we go back to 1 Peter and finish out that thing like we started, but let none of you suffer as a murderer, a thief, or an evildoer, or a busybody in other people's matters. Sometimes we do suffer for the things that we do outside of God. And if we're suffering in those matters, it's time for us, as Peter wrote, it's okay for us to be ashamed of those things that we've done. But if we're suffering as a Christian because we have faith and we are sharing who he is, or we are just literally walking through life and not doing the things that other people do, that they exalt as their God, and they're coming at us and saying, well, it's because of Christ, because he's redeeming. Those are no longer things that I hold dear. And we have that suffering, and we give that glory to God. In giving it back to him, the focus turns from me and what I want to him and who he is. And it goes on. Let him glorify God in this matter. Therefore, let those who suffer according to the will of God commit their souls to him in doing good. He's a faithful creator. We have to pull ourselves back and realize that in this suffering, in this moment, if we're suffering for what he's calling us to do, it's his will. And it's okay. And when we give that back to him, guess what changes? Us. Right? If we hold on to it and we're saying, but God, I can't handle this. We go back to the book of Job, right? God, I can't handle the loss of my kids. I can't handle the loss of my business. I can't handle the loss of... It keeps going to, I can't do this. And you're right, we can't. But when we give it back to him and say, God, whatever your will is, whatever you're asking me to do, if I need to give this up because you're calling me to something else, it's okay. And in doing so, we change who we are because our focus is no longer me, what I want. So how do we respond to suffering? Well, the first thing is we accept that it is the will of God. We're not going to get bitter over the thing, right? We're not going to sit there and say, oh, I can't believe God would do this to me. Instead, we say, God, thank you. Because I know in your time, you're going to make this work out for your good. As we walk through this, I get the opportunity to share your love with somebody that I may never have seen before, that I may never see again. You're bringing me to a new level, a new spot of what you call us to, and we commit our souls to him, right? We trust him in all things that he has this taken care of. Peter didn't stop there. In fact, I think he really knew that his life was coming near an end. And so he put together another quick book. And he wrote about a lot of things. But I want to focus on the last thing he had, because it really brings about all of 1 Peter. We keep talking about bringing it up to the glory of him. Why do we go through sufferings? Why do we get this frustration? It's because of this. The biggest idea of 2 Peter is the end. Look forward to Christ's coming kingdom. If we have a goal in mind, right? We've set up this idea of what we're going to go to and where we're going at. all the stuff in between, we can make it through. When we look and say, okay, God, I know that you have this in front of me, and this is the kingdom of God, all that stuff to get there doesn't matter anymore. Which means, even in my death, it's okay. Because my goal isn't to do things or to be here or to be known. It's to get closer to him and go to his kingdom. And when that's our goal, the amount of suffering we go through here is just to make it to that point. In fact, the key verse is in 2 Peter is 2 Peter 3, 10 through 14. But the day of the Lord will come like a thief in the night, in which the heavens will pass away with a great noise, and the elements will melt with fervent heat. Both the earth and the works that are in it will be burned up. Again, I think Peter's really a secret pyro in all of this. Therefore, since all these things will be dissolved, what manner of persons ought you to be in holy conduct and godliness, looking for and hastening the coming of the day of God, because of which the heavens will be dissolved, being on fire, and the elements will melt with fervent heat. Nevertheless, we, according to his promise, look for new heavens and a new earth in which righteousness dwells. Therefore, beloved, looking forward to these things, be diligent to be found by him in peace. Sometimes in our lives, we pull things to us because we know that if I hold on to this, then it means something. My wife makes fun of me all the time. I have more than a couple books. Like I think my app says I have close to 3,000. I've gotten rid of a bunch. As we were unpacking and trying to go through things, she's like, do you really need this book? So every book that I took out of the box, I'm like, every single book. And every time I grabbed a book and I brought it over to the book pile that I would be willing to get rid of, as I'm shaking and putting it in that pile, I'm going, okay, God, I know there's a reason for this. But we hold on to things that mean nothing, right? What happens if tomorrow a house catches on fire and all those things we held dear are gone? I've known a lot of people over my life that out of nowhere, their house sparks and ignites. I remember when my uncle's house got hit by lightning and the whole thing went up. And the firefighters got there, and guess what? There was nothing they could do. They contained the fire, and we watched this brand new house with everything that they owned, everything that they had from their wedding. And I mean, I go back to I lost my grandpa's Bible and that, even though it wasn't mine, priceless heirlooms were gone. And I remember my aunt showing me, she found a bottom portion of a greeting card. And it said, in all things, give it to God, and he will handle it. That was all that was left of this greeting card. And there's charm marks, and she took it and framed it. Everything that they had was gone. And it was time to start over new. I'm not telling you it was the last struggle that they ever went through. I'm not telling you it will be the last struggle that they go through. But God uses those things to bring us closer to him and realize that the stuff that we think that we need is nothing. When we have a goal and a mindset that we have to go after him so that when we get to that point, it's all about his kingdom and getting closer to him. The rest of this doesn't matter. If we keep going on this too, we talk about holy conduct and godliness. We have to be holy conduct and godliness. We have to live set apart as we look at his return. If we're walking down the street and everybody's like, yeah, they're just the same as everybody else, are we really showing holy conduct and godliness? Because I promise you, you walk down the streets and you know there's not holy conduct and godliness going on. Doesn't matter what town you go to. It doesn't matter what state or what country you go to. You can see that there is a difference in those that follow after him because it's not about them. It's about him. We have to look forward to what is coming next. Right? We look with eagerness to Christ's return. We look forward and saying, God, you're coming back again, and everything that I have, it doesn't matter because it's going to be with you. And if we go back to that very verse, right, everything's going to be burned up anyway. So why do we keep holding on to those things so dear? The last part in this is we need to be diligent. We have to labor to build Christ's kingdom as we wait for him to return. You know, the early Christians, they had to hide in catacombs so that they could have communion without people trying to kill them, so that they could talk and they could read these books that we just leave on a shelf. They shared them with each other, these letters that went to them. They had to hide so that they could do it together. What are we doing to really build his kingdom? This is the reason why we do the Build the Kingdom offering. And I got a little slide for that, but my wife and I sat and prayed heavily over it this year. And before we turned it in, we looked at each other and then we looked at each other one night and said, are you sure this is what it is? And I just felt deep in my heart, I know we're going to give more than what we put down. This is what God's calling us to today. And those things that we give to, right? They're what? They're the camp. They're to stop the generations of hurt. They're to bring kids closer to him that it maybe have never been to. This is the point that we talk about this week. We look at things that are passionate within our house. Church planting, right? We got 5 locations here in Iowa right now. My prayer is to see 5 more in the next couple of years. But how do we do that? We have to raise up leaders. We have to build them, which is all about the college, right? We have to train them so that they know what these things are. These books aren't just some words on a paper, but they are the holy words of God that inspire us, that change us, that build us into someone that reflects his glory. And globally, man, some of the most fertile soil to grow God's kingdom doesn't happen here in America. They're eager. And I got to spend some time this past couple of months with Pastor Hilton and Pastor Elwood, just talking to them about their countries. And it's amazing to me how people just don't know. I spent some time talking to a kid not that long ago, and he literally said, I grew up in a small town not far from here. And Jesus was just a word that we said when we were mad. I didn't know what it meant. He had never once heard that God loved him. He saw it on the billboards, but nobody told him. Nobody spent the time to talk to him. And what are we doing to build the kingdom? We need to empower and strengthen this for his return. When's his return? I don't know. Could it be tomorrow? Sure. Could it be 50 years? Sure. Could it be 2,000 years from now? It doesn't matter when he comes back. We know that he's coming back. And we need to continue to build the kingdom and grow. With all this is what we need to do. We need to stop and apply this information. Because we can't just read something and gain information. We have to actually live it out. So what do we do with this? Well, the whole point of 1 Peter is this. Where are you suffering? Because let's be real. We all have different areas that we're suffering in. And so what I want to do is I want to take just a second. I want to ask you, where are you suffering? And write it down on your notes. I think most of us just had this flash right away. This is what's up. This is where it's at. I can tell you this week's been really hard in my head about different things, and because I knew I was preaching this. I knew that it was coming. And so those things just boil out, and the suffering comes more, and we're easy to just snap and say, you know what? I know exactly what God is calling me to, because he's working through this. And we need to trust him through this. Whatever area that you're suffering in, write it down, pray, and give it back to him. Just say, this is no longer mine. Whether it's fear or anxiety, whether it's pain, whether there's some deeper physical things that are going on, we just need to give it to him and say, you know what, God, you got it. It's okay. It's gone. And 2 Peter is this: Christ is coming soon. Are you ready to meet him? I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to pretend like every single person is doing great and we need to examine our own hearts. Are we really ready to stand before God himself? And if we say no, then today's your day where you need to change that. It's not I need to think about it. I need to analyze it. I'm a thinker. I'm an analyzer. There's a point of action where you need to just let it go and follow him. And what do we need to do to labor in his return? If it's not today that you've already made the decision, then what are you putting aside and saying, you know, eventually I'll go talk to my neighbor. Eventually I'll go talk to my friend. Eventually. What if it's too late? I made a deal with a friend of mine to talk to him about Jesus at our graduation party. 2 weeks before graduation, he got in a car wreck and died. That was it for me. I can't stop. Because we don't know what we have left. He was 17 years old. Now, sitting at his funeral, I got to hear how 2 weeks before his uncle got to pray with him. I don't put things off anymore because you never know what day it could be. But God's calling each one of us to step out. So I want to just ask you to close your eyes and bow your heads and just reflect for a second. Where are you today? Do you need God's peace in your life? Are you sure that when you stand before him, that he's going to say, well done, my good and faithful servant? Or is he going to say, I don't know you? If you're not sure that he knows, that you talk to him, that your life is for him, if you're not sure, then today's the day where you need to give it all up. Whatever's holding you back, you need to put it as a sacrifice to him. As he sacrificed his life, now it's time for you to sacrifice these little things in front of you. And if you don't know what to say, then you can repeat after me. You say, Dear Jesus, I need help. I give you my life, my addictions, my pain, my heartache. They're yours. Help me to follow you. Help me to listen to your voice. Be the Lord and leader of my life. Amen. If you said that you can't just say that in your head and pretend like it's gonna just, okay, it's gonna click, you gotta share it with somebody. Just like Peter brought along Mark for those tough times, there's gonna be tough times. You got to open your mouth and say, today, I prayed a prayer, and I want you to walk with me and help me. And if you need to do more than that, and you need to physically let go of everything that you have, and you need to get baptized. Baptism is dying to your old way of self and rising up new. We got short shirts and towels, and we would love to be there with you. Just grab one of us later. And Rob's always excited about that baptism. And it doesn't have to be one of us. If there's somebody close to you, you need to do it today, then let's do it today. The last thing we need to do is this. Every week we say a blessing over each one of your lives. That blessing is not about us. It's about Him. So why don't you repeat this with me? God, be gracious to us and bless us. Make His face shine upon us, that His word may be known on earth, His saving power among all nations. Thanks, guys, so much. If you need prayer or baptism, come talk. Otherwise, if you just want to hang out and be with people, please do. We will see you on Wednesday for the Christmas party. And see you next week as well. Have a great one.
Yeah, I heard him at one point.